somebody sign this. Okay. Good to see you today. Here we are wrapping up. I was marked time in here, but this is week 11, right? I think that's right. So before the hour's over, we'll talk about the upcoming exam for you. So maybe I'll have a little detail to share with you there. So anyway, hope you're having a good day. So we will barge ahead and complete our study here in chapter 11. Kind of ended before, or we finished the hour last time before we finished the chapter. So I want to finish the chapter here today. And I'll just kind of review a couple of things real quick. Let's go to the doc cam. I'm sorry, to the PowerPoint if we can, Radar. So this first picture, of course, should look familiar to you. I tell you what, let me go to the bigger. All right, so, you know, some of the problems, kind of the ad hoc problems I gave y'all last time, was to find the profit maximizing price and quantity that the monopolist will sell at. Of course, in every market structure, you equate marginal cost. So here's your marginal cost curve and the marginal revenue curve. And then, so that'll give you the quantity down here. And then you extend the vertical line up from the quantity to the demand curve to get the price. So you got the price here, and you got average total cost on the ATC curve. So hopefully that opens up a margin on each unit. So if that's the average profit, which is difference between revenue or price and average total cost, you multiply that by the number of units, you get the area of that green rectangle there, which is the economic profit. Now, that's a long-run picture for monopolists because there's barriers to entry, and that economic profit can be sustained over time. But, you know, you might also have a loss, right? In which case, if the ATC curve is too high, total cost exceeds the price, so you might have a loss. All right, so I want to look at this picture just a second. The individual monopolist, you know, does not have a supply curve. So you'll notice here on the left, we talk about a purely competitive market here. Actually, this is a picture of two markets, but for monopoly, whoops, let's go back. For monopoly, the firm is the supply side of the market, okay? All right, because there's only one firm. In perfectly competitive situations, you have many firms. So they write up here supply equals marginal cost. This is a horizontal addition of all the firm's marginal cost curves here on the left. But the social optimal, if you will, is achieved in the marketplace. Again here, when price equals marginal cost, okay? Because price equals marginal revenue, and in every market structure, a rational producer will try to equate marginal revenue and marginal cost. Okay, so here there is, for the typical firm, no profit, zero profit. Is that a good thing? It's okay. All right, it's a normal state of affairs. It's called a normal profit. Okay, so you want to grab onto this in economics, okay? If you have zero economic profit, that's different than saying zero accounting profit. Now, if you tell somebody, you know, most people think in terms of accounting profit. So they look at, for instance, I mean, they look at their explicit revenues and their explicit costs. Maybe their bank book, okay? If you run everything through, and I've had a few enterprises, not very big, but run everything through my checking account, okay? Run everything through my checking account. And if my balance at the end of the year is higher than it was at the beginning of the year, I'm thinking, I got a profit, okay? But that's revenue minus explicit cost, which gets you accounting profit. And, you know, if I'm $10 higher at the end of the year than I was at the beginning of the year, I have a profit, but it's not very impressive, okay? And so, you know, I might say I had a $10 profit. Now, an economist would say you had a loss because you're not subtracting your implicit cost, All right, but that's what we're looking at here in these pictures, like back up here, is economic profit. So this is what's left over after you subtract from revenue, not only your explicit cost, but also your implicit cost. So we looked at some examples there. I haven't spent much time on this in this class. Perhaps I should have. I kind of feel like this might be an area I need to focus a little more attention on next time, maybe give you a few more problems on calculating economic profit. We looked at the simple example of the person who quits their job at the post office, okay? And so part of the cost is this implicit cost of foregoing a salary that you might earn in your next best alternative. And so we spent some time on that, but probably could have spent a little more time on that. But if you got anything left over after you subtract both explicit and implicit costs, that's a good thing. So at any rate, when I go back to this picture here on the left, you'll see that there's no profit there, okay? Like we had, I don't mean to make us seasick, but I want to go back to this picture. There's a profit there, right? Green area, there's no green area here. It's still on the left in a purely competitive market. That's a normal state of affairs, okay? So that's, you have kind of an equilibrium situation. You don't have people entering the industry. You don't have people leaving the industry because there's losses, okay? There's no profit attracting people, no losses driving people out. Again, I don't mean to belabor this too much, but here in this situation here, that's a lure. I used the word lure the last couple of times. That green area is a lure to other owners of capital to enter the industry, okay? But the problem with monopoly is there's barriers to entry, keeps them out, okay? In perfect competition, you have no barriers to entry. So that green area there, that economic profit would get competed away. Of course, you could have a loss. So here you have a loss, again, if the average total cost curve is too high, in which case you're going to have people leave the market over time if it were perfect competition. Now, this is a monopolist, okay? All right, so they're kind of locked into this for a period of time. A monopolist does not have to enjoy a profit. They may experience a loss. But anyway, so there's no profit on the left for a purely competitive market. The firms are earning what's called a normal profit. If there's zero economic profit, that's said to be a normal profit, okay? It's a normal state of affairs. There's not people rushing in. There's not people exiting from the industry. It's just kind of a normal situation. Now, for the monopolist on the right, you'll see that, again, the monopolist will gravitate to this point B on the demand curve. It's to the left and above point C, which kind of corresponds to this intersection on the left. Point C is where society wants the market to be. This is the social optimum. So you would have more units traded at a lower price, okay? It would be, they use maybe C here because that kind of corresponds to the competitive market equilibrium. But alas, with monopolists, they charge a higher price and sell fewer units. Why? Because they get a higher profit, okay? And so we've looked at that here because, again, I want to equate marginal revenue and marginal cost, and that puts you over here. So what you see is there's this shaded area here to represent the surplus that would be enjoyed between the supplier and the demander if the monopolist would allow the market to expand to the competitive market equilibrium. In other words, if they would lower their price and sell more units. Now, it doesn't make them any better. I mean, they lose a little and gain a little. We've talked a little bit about, last time we looked about at how if you go from C to D, the monopolist loses this bottom rectangle. I hope you can follow. Is that visible? They lose this in the way of surplus, but they gain this in the way of surplus. And generally, the square rectangle is bigger than this bottom triangle. The consumer definitely loses. So on whole, society is, is enjoying less surplus here at point B than at point C. But at point B, again, the monopolist is much happier. The demand side, the consumer, is a little bit sadder, if that makes sense. Okay? All right? So, well, so the monopolist is going to want to be at point B. So at any rate, there's some left out exchanges here that society would want to have, and they're not going to experience this. This is called a deadweight loss or efficiency loss. So there's these units that could be sold at a price higher than marginal cost. And so you have allocative inefficiency. So make sure you understand that. There's no allocative efficiency here for a monopolist. I remember years ago when I taught this, I've kind of come back to teaching this course again over in recent history, but would have students calculate the deadweight loss. It would simply be the area of this triangle here that's associated, the deadweight loss associated with monopoly. So again, that deadweight loss shows that on the whole, society is not quite as well off because of the monopoly power that one side of the market has. But the monopolist is made much happier at point B, and consumers lose little, producers gain a lot. But on the whole, I'll just say on the whole, society loses, okay? All right. Is there any questions on that? Okay. I won't have you compute the deadweight loss, but there's less total surplus at point B than at point C. And there's efficiency loss, again, because price is above marginal cost. There's no allocative efficiency. I hope you understand what allocative efficiency is. We explained that in the previous chapter on perfect competition. That exists when price equals marginal cost. Okay? The last unit sold is sold at a price equal to its marginal cost. So the right amount of resources are being allocated into the production of that good. Society's not saying, I want more, more, more. Okay? They're not saying that when price equals marginal cost. We're allocating the right amount of resource. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let me scroll down here a little bit and talk today a little bit about price discrimination. Monopolists sometimes will try to engage in price discrimination, or when I say monopolist, we'll see this also in monopolistic competition and in oligopolies just a little bit, but particularly for firms that have significant market power, that is the ability to raise their price without losing market share. Another way of putting that, if a firm faces a downward sloping demand curve, they may try to engage in price discrimination. Now, a lot of times overt price discrimination, just blatant price discrimination, may be illegal. Alas, when you go to the grocery store and you buy a head of lettuce, you go through the line, they're not going to charge you a different price depending on what side of town you live on or what your profession is. They're going to say, are you a blue collar worker or white collar worker? That's head of lettuce is such and such. Accordingly. No, I mean that would be illegal, right? We'd have laws against this. But firms nevertheless have a way of still implementing price discrimination. And first off, we ask ourselves, why would a firm want to do that in the first place? A firm that has market power will try to price discriminate. That is, it'll try to segregate the market, its market, into two different camps. And it'll charge each camp a price that'll maximize its profit in that particular market. We've got a picture coming up here, just this is where we're going here. Here is a monopolist that charges different prices for two different markets. Here, you notice it says small businesses on the left. It says students here on the right. So maybe there's a software company. It sells software to small businesses and to students. And they know that small businesses have to have this particular software to run on their computer system. Maybe it's an accounting software or something like that. They kind of have to have it because they're in business, It's just a cost of doing business. So small businesses may pay more for the product than would students. Students say, I'd like to have it, but got competing interest and needs here for my income. And so the market for this good, say this computer software, would be more price elastic for students than it is for small businesses. Small businesses have a greater need and so forth. They're willing to pay a higher price. So if there's some way, you've developed this neat, snazzy app or something like that, and you can segregate the market between students and small businesses, you would. Because you're going to expand profit and charge a price in each market that'll give you a maximum profit. And in total then, the monopolist will enjoy a greater profit than what they would enjoy way back up here in this picture. Let's see, right up here. Okay? So here, in this picture, the monopolist is charging a single price, and here's their economic profit. Okay? But if they can split their market up, or that is, if they can, I'm sorry for the scrolling here, but if they can segregate their market into two camps, it's called price discrimination, charge profit maximizing prices in each market, they will. And here the green areas added together is bigger than it would be for the monopolist if they charge a single price. Okay, so they'll price discriminate if they can. If there's some legal way they can do it. Again, if you look here just a second, you'll see students are more price elastic. The good is more price elastic in the student population than it is for small businesses. Remember back when we talked about price elasticity a little bit, and I kept going back to insulin, say. Insulin has almost that vertical demand curve, kind of the same idea here, if you will. For small businesses, they got to have the software. It's a new way. It reduces their expenses and so forth to use this new app or software. So you'll see their demand here is almost vertical. The demand curve that this firm faces in this market is almost vertical. Price inelastic population here on the left. You have a price elastic population here on the right. In both cases, you equate marginal cost with marginal revenues. For simplicity here, and you'll see this a lot, we drew a horizontal marginal cost curve. You see that horizontal? It's really U-shaped, okay? But if you focus in close enough, you can kind of make this local linearity assumption. And just to make, it doesn't change the theory here. So to draw these pictures here, they drew a horizontal marginal cost curve and average total cost curve. So that's fine, okay? Still, it's the case, marginal cost intersects minimum average total cost. If the ATC curve were U-shaped, marginal cost would go through the minimum, right? But if the ATC curve is flat, marginal cost curve is going to lay right on it. Okay, so it's just kind of a simplifying assumption we make here. But at any rate, with a steeper demand curve, then you're going to charge a higher price. You go to where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Remember, the marginal revenue line is twice as steep as the individual demand curve. This is the kind of the market demand, if you will, in this for small businesses. So, if you're a monopolist, you're a monopolist in each of these submarkets. So the price here is higher, going to be higher than it is over here. In both cases, you equate marginal revenue and marginal cost, and then you look up at the demand curve to see the price. All right, so this is a price discriminating monopolist. Does it make sense? How they're treating two different populations differently. When might this happen? Okay, certainly, for airlines, they have a way of charging business travelers different than they do vacationers and so forth. How do they do that, by the way? Y'all travel very much or what have you? So if your business, you might be locked into a particular, you might be locked into a particular pattern. You may, you want to return on Friday or something and go across the country. You're not going to be traveling just whenever you want to. You're kind of constrained by time, and in which case you wind up charging a higher price. The ultimate is to fly on standby, to go around the country on standby, and you can do that a lot cheaper, right? If you're more flexible, which vacationers typically are, they often are able to travel at a cheaper rate. Movie theaters, kind of the same thing here. Movie theaters can discriminate by charging children a lower price than adults. Okay, so that's legal. It may not be legal for the grocery store to charge children and adults a different price on a head of lettuce, but they can certainly do it on movie tickets and so forth. I go down to railroad companies a little bit. Your book talks about each one of these, but railroad companies, they'll charge so many dollars per ton of freight. They move 100 miles or what have you. But guess what? They'll charge a higher, and they can get away with this. This is fine. They can charge a higher rate per tonnage when they're shipping automobiles or beef as opposed to gravel. Okay, two different prices. So it depends again on what you're shipping. So it's a way again of price discriminating, and they know that dealership in Claremore, Oklahoma here wants to bring some automobiles down from Detroit. They're going to pay. They're willing to pay a higher rate per ton to get their freight down here than would another company that's just importing gravel. Okay, so railroad companies have a way of segregating these two markets, charging a higher price for those who are willing and able to pay a higher price. They got to get those automobiles down here to get them on the lot to sell, okay, and so forth. So railroad companies engage in this. Coupons is another one. Now this is how the grocery store can price discriminate, okay? My dear wife, I used to call her Kathy Coupons, because every Sunday she'd get, I don't know, back then she'd get the Sunday paper. And this is a ritual. On Sunday afternoon, she'd clip the coupons out. She'd have a stack of coupons. She'd take that with her every week to go shopping. And it saved us a lot of money. Now here's the deal. Not everyone will clip coupons out of the newspaper. Some people, if you think about it a second, there's kind of a correlation here. Some people who are busy through the week, they're professionals, and they already have a high income. They're already willing and able to pay a higher price. Those people are the very people who generally say, I don't have time to clip coupons. Whereas we back there in the day, we didn't make a whole lot of money, and my wife certainly thought it was worth her time to clip coupons. So we, being less willing and able to pay a high price for a T-bone steak, ultimately could pay a lower price because we showed up at the grocery store, I say a T-bone steak, whatever it is, with a coupon. So that coupon lets those who value their time at a lower dollar rate than other people, it allows them to purchase the good at a lower price. Okay? Other people who, there's this old question about, would Bill Gates bend over and pick up a $100 bill? I would, but he might not. Why might Bill Gates not bend over and pick up a $100 bill? Because it might make him 2 seconds late to a meeting. And if he's a little bit late for a meeting, then that could cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the point in the extreme, okay? The point in the extreme is for people who value their time at a lower level, dollar level, if you will, than others, then they can still purchase the good if they show up with a coupon. So anyway, it's a way of price discriminating. I just kind of wanted to mention that. So ultimately, if you're able to segregate as a monopolist your market into two different camps, sub-markets if you will, then you'll charge a profit maximizing price in each one. Okay, now I'll just say that if we go back here, you have some conditions, and I don't know if we have them on these slides here. I forgot to check, but generally speaking, there's 3 conditions that have to be in place before you can price discriminate. And these are mentioned on page 239 of your text. Okay, 3 conditions. You have to have monopoly power. Okay, that makes sense. A wheat farmer is not going to price discriminate. It's a perfectly competitive market. You have to be able to segregate your market into camps. And then you have to somehow preclude resale from one camp to the other, okay? In other words, if you get a student discount, you can't take your, whatever it is, your coupon or something, go take it and give it to a business, you know, and let them enjoy. So you imagine this software I was talking about, if you could somehow get a coupon to get this software $10 cheaper, and you say, I'm going to go over here and take it to a business and sell it for $20 because they can't get it, all right? Somehow you got to preclude that kind of activity, okay? So you have to be able to forbid any resale. The original purchaser cannot resell the product or service. So your book says this condition suggests that service industries such as transportation or industries for legal and medical services where resale is impossible are good candidates for price discrimination. Okay, so at any rate, monopolists will try to do this. Okay, hope that makes sense. Well, I want to go down to this picture now. I want to talk today a little bit more about, I just mentioned this last time as we were leaving, about rate regulations of natural monopolies. So here again, we're talking about public utilities like natural gas, electricity. These firms, they have kind of the exclusive right, if you will, to deliver these services to your home. Okay, these are often natural monopolies, and that's a critical distinction to note here. Public utilities, where we regulate a lot of times, are natural monopolies. A natural monopoly, you see I'm tracing out, has a downward sloping average total cost curve. We've seen that before, okay? It means that the average total cost of delivering a kilowatt hour, say, of electricity decreases as the plant size gets larger. I mentioned this before, just say it again, you have great economies of scale, and that's what we're illustrating here, great economies of scale in power generation, electric power and so forth. You can have a little wind turbine generator in your backyard or wherever on your farm, and you can sell the electricity to the grid, but guess what? You can sell it to the grid, but you can't produce it as cheaply as that big coal-burning plant outside of your town or whatever. I have one outside of our town, big, huge thing, huge fixed cost that's invested there before it produces the first kilowatt hour of electricity. Huge economies of scale in the delivery of electricity and gas and these things. So on public utilities in general. So that means there's a downward sloping average total cost curve. Because there's a linkage here, about three things here, okay? Because there's a downward sloping average total cost curve, that means then that marginal cost is below average total cost. Remember the average marginal rule, okay? If the average is being pulled down, it's because the marginal is less than the average. So for this whole relevant range of quantities here, we might be delivering, the monopolist might be delivering to the market. Marginal cost is going to be less than average total cost. All right. Now that says then that the socially optimal price, which is where price equals marginal cost, that is to say where the demand curve intersects the marginal cost curve, is below the average total cost curve. You see this point R is below the red curve. This is where society wants to be. They want a lot of electricity at a cheap price. Okay? Society is better off in the aggregate at point R. However, there's a problem with forcing the public utility company to charge a rate equal to P sub R here. All right, so these public utility companies usually are confined to certain prices they can charge per unit of their service by a rate-making authority in their state. So in Oklahoma, it's the Corporation Commission. So if Oklahoma Natural Gas, Oklahoma Gas and Electric wants to raise their rate, they have to go before this commission and get approval to do so, okay? And here is where, if everybody had a vote, we all get to vote for who sits on the Corporation Commission, by the way. It's a 3-member commission in the state of Oklahoma. and they supposedly represent us, okay? But if they purely represented the demand side of the market, really, and try to determine what's in the best interest for society as a whole, they would constrain the firm to charge a rate equal to a P sub R. But this won't work for the monopolist. And the reason why is because it's below the average total cost curve, okay? When the rate that's allowed by the monopolist is below average total cost, they can't make a profit. In fact, the firm's going to experience a loss, right? You see that here at price P sub R per kilowatt hour of electricity. The firm will not earn a profit. It'll earn a loss. Okay, so the socially optimal price will force the monopolist, OG&E or what have you, to experience a loss. And that's unsustainable. Okay? Now, there are ways to make this happen. The only way you can make it happen, though, is if the state provides a subsidy to the monopolist. Okay? In other words, OG&E, their revenues aren't purely coming from their ratepayers, but they're also coming from the taxpayers. Okay? Now, if that's the case, then they don't necessarily have to experience a loss. But that can be kind of a cumbersome thing and so forth. Additionally, the amount of that subsidy is kind of hard to determine because it will be computed to close this gap between marginal cost and average total cost. And guess what? Public utilities in general, how shall I say this in a way that is kind of diplomatic, but public utilities in general have very little incentive to accurately report their cost of producing electricity or gas or what have you. Mentioned this last time, that you have inefficiencies that are endemic to public utilities. If you go to one of their corporate offices or what have you, you'll see money lavishly spent on a lot of things, furnishings and so forth. And I know there are exceptions, okay, so someone can take exceptions, email me, and that's fine, that's okay. But this has been recognized kind of across the board in public utilities, is that there's no drive toward productive efficiency. What you have are what are called X inefficiencies. Your book talks about X inefficiencies. These are just costs that are embedded that aren't really necessary. Sometimes you hear the words cost padding used in public utilities. So, it costs so many cents per kilowatt hour. Well, let's look at that a little closer. Oh, you're covering the costs for all these furnishings and so forth, or all these conventions that your employees go to and so forth. So, at any rate, you don't have the discipline there. Why? Why would public utilities not have the discipline to trim costs like most other firms that operate in a free market of some sort? Why do you think? Really, even a monopolist in general, but public utilities are different than just a generic monopolist, like the only used car dealer in town. They're a monopolist too, but they still have an incentive to trim their cost. But not so with public utilities. And why is that? Okay, all right, that's right. They're publicly funded. They are guaranteed a rate. That's right. They are guaranteed a rate. The rate making authority comes together and they'll say, okay, you can charge so-and-so. Okay? So they are guaranteed a rate that they can charge their consumers. They're not competing with anyone and so forth. They're guaranteed that rate. And they can open up for themselves a profit, but guess what? If in the next examination period they've actually trimmed some cost, that ATC curve goes down, it would be reflected in their financial statements, and the rate they get to charge their customers would have to fall. Okay? So it's just kind of a problem you have with regulating public utilities. All right, so you'll never achieve, without a subsidy, allocative efficiency. For a monopolist. The price equal to marginal cost would not allow the firm to ostensibly report a profit, okay? So a fair rate of return is where a monopolist will claim it will want to be, right up here at P sub F. Here the profit is zero. That's a normal situation, normal profit, where the economic profit's equal to zero. And that's where average total cost equals price, okay? Now the problem here is if they're allowed to bump their price up a little bit, the problem of course is, again, with the cost padding situation, what part of the total cost of operating that the firm reports is really necessary, okay? And that's a problem as well, okay? So the fair rate of return, theoretically here, if total costs are reported accurately by the monopolist, is a great place to be. And if you have to get there by providing the monopolist a subsidy, well, okay, that might be fine. But again, the problem is you got this guaranteed rate, in this case P sub F, that the monopolist can charge that'll cover all of their costs, regardless of how necessary those costs are. Okay, so at any rate, your book talks a little bit about some of these problems associated with regulating monopoly. The key feature again is you got economies of scale, downward sloping average total cost curve, ATC curve, which means marginal cost is below ATC. And so you'll never achieve allocative efficiency here without a subsidy, okay? All right, that pretty much, I think you can get the rest, a little more detail on this. That's the dilemma of regulation and so forth. So let me bump off the PowerPoint here just a second and talk about our test that's coming up. Maybe I need to work another problem or two. Let's see, y'all got any questions here? Because I'm kind of thinking, you know, the exam covers chapters 7, 9, 10, and 11, I think. I think it's chapter 8 is that right? Chapter 8 we skipped, okay, which is dealing with, chapter 8 dealt with, we might come back to it, but behavioral economics, which is very interesting, but we don't, you know, actually, beginning in Unit 2, but certainly from this point forward in the course, I kind of have to cherry pick through some of these topics in the remainder of the book that are most critical for you to go ahead. And, you know, I'm teaching a graduate level micro course this semester, and I've been putting up videos from this class and last semester when I taught this class, because the review is so important for folks at that level. In the MBA microecon course, they go back, and if it's been a while since they've thought about monopolies and perfect competition, these are foundational. The things that you've been doing, we've been doing together in this course, kind of foundational for doing more advanced studies in a lot of fields. Certainly if you're marketing and so forth, you need to know what a monopolist is and what perfect competitions is and these other market structures are and how they typically behave. So the focus will remain on market structures after this unit, which will embark on Unit 3 after this exam. We'll stay on market structures for a little while, and then just to let you know kind of where we're headed after that, we're going to look at resource markets. Okay, we've been kind of focusing on product markets, but we'll get to resource markets, and I want to spend a couple weeks talking about the demand for resources in Chapter 16 and the wage determination in Chapter 17. So those are very important micro topics that you may revisit in your graduate studies or your more advanced studies in your particular field. Certainly, again, if you're marketing or that's a close cousin to economics. But if you do an MBA, okay, I don't want you to be in an MBA program down the road and you say, hey, Dr. J didn't tell us about this, okay? We didn't even learn about this. So it's been an eye-opener for me to teach in the MBA microecon course this year. And I taught that course at another school years ago. But I recognized that a typical course at that level will presuppose a knowledge on your part of all these market structures, particularly monopoly and perfect competition. Okay, I put up a list of questions for you. Okay, so there's a goodly number of those. And also, you want to review these market theory problems that I had last time, and could ask you some of that. So we got quite a bit of time left. So if y'all got a question, we'll take a quick stroll down memory lane. Now, we pretty much covered Chapter 6 on the first exam. I mean, actually, I kind of rounded the corner a little bit. I don't know if you noticed or not. But your first exam really went up through Section 3 in Chapter 6. Okay? So price elasticity and all that was on your first exam. So, even though you had homework on the rest of Chapter 6, I thought, well, we don't need to do this on Exam 2. So Exam 2 picks up with Chapter 7. And, just some concepts here. I guess I'll go to the .chem, okay? Look at some of this, unless y'all got any other question. I'm here today. It's kind of tough to do, actually, in this environment just a bit, because maybe we got folks watching out there, and I don't always watch my email. I mentioned that I would, but I don't always watch my email like I should up here because I got a lot going on. But if you got a question, anyone here or anyone might be watching right now or later, feel free to email me, okay? But this is a very important concept. You see on page 137 of your text. Diminishing marginal utility causes total utility to achieve a maximum and so forth. So I think we might look at some questions I put up for you on Chapter 7 here in a minute. But this was a very important exercise related to that we did together in class. I think we had apples and oranges. Remember, we took a certain budget and you worked your way down to determine what the rational consumer would purchase in the way of these two goods. Now, you will have some problems on this, okay? And problems of differing forms. Let me just write it this way. I called it the rational spending rule. I've also called it the bang per buck rule, which I used to think was kind of silly until I heard Professor Jonathan Gruber use the same term. And I watch this sometimes. He teaches this course at MIT. Believe me, it's pretty mathematical, okay? So I don't compare myself to Jonathan Gruber. But at any rate, he used the term bang per buck rule. And I go, son of a gun, that's what, I thought I coined that term. But a lot of times you'll hear it called the rational spending rule instead, or something like that. Rational spending rule says that a rational person's going to expend their income across a universe of consumption goods, and we'll just look at two goods here, so that the last dollar spent will equate marginal utility per price across the two goods. If it were three goods, then you would have marginal utility of C over price of C. In other words, you get the same bang per buck on the last dollar spent. Okay? So, I don't have this here. I could have probably printed this out. But, okay, keep that in mind, okay? Just keep that in mind. I think what I'll do, if I can, I probably should have come in here earlier. See if I can do this on the fly here. If I can pull up some of your questions. Yeah, thank you here. It's going to want, you know what, we got this 3-factor authentication, don't we? I don't have my phone. Oh, wouldn't you know it? All right, I'm sorry. I'll not be able to do it here, okay? I don't think so. Let me try it. Yeah, now it's going to text my telephone, which is in my office. Okay, never mind. Never mind. Let's just look at the problem here in your book. It's the same problem, just got different numbers, but I'll jog your memory, okay? It should be sufficient. But if you have any trouble with any of those, let me know. Here's the one we worked in class. We had a $10 budget, okay? We could expand the budget, doesn't matter, just to make it more interesting. I don't know. Let's see. Let's say you got a $14 budget now, okay? So instead of 10, let's go 14, okay? Just make it more interesting, okay? Now here's what's going on here is that you have apples and oranges, and we have a column here for the marginal utility derived from each one of these, okay? Now again, we've looked at this before. Point in doing this is you're going to have some problems on this test out of Chapter 7. This is kind of a major focus dealing with what we did on this problem here. You will want, as a rational consumer, to spend that $14 in a way where the last dollar you spend will satisfy this, okay? Until that point, you'll probably have a disequilibrium here. Now, let's just think about this a second. And we got apples and oranges here, so I'll come back and refer to that here in a second. So we got marginal utility here, and you divide by the price. They tell you the price of an apple is $1 and the price of an orange is $2. Y'all see that? So you take each marginal utility and divide by the price so that you're constructing this fraction here, marginal utility per price, for each unit of the good that you could potentially consume. Now, let me tell you this, that in some of the problems I put up for you, okay, I didn't give you marginal utility. I gave you total utility. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but you can get, of course, marginal utility from total utility. Let me show you what I mean, of course, and if you're a little rusty on this. I think these numbers are it. What if instead of these numbers here, I gave you these numbers? Okay, the total utility for the first apple is 10. The total utility for 2 apples is 18 utils. Okay, so this is 1 apple. This is for 2 apples, and so forth. This is total utility. All right, and I'm just saying here, just reviewing the concept. If the first apple delivers 10 utils, and the second apple and 2 apples for the week delivers 18 utils, then how would we fill out this column? Okay, so you might start with total utility. Well, what's the marginal utility on the first apple? What do you think, class? 10, right? It's the same as the total utility on the first apple. So if you're asked to find marginal utility, then on the first one it's 10. Okay, you got to have marginal utility to use the rational spending rule. Okay, you got to have marginal. What's the marginal utility on the second apple? Not total utility for 2 apples, but the marginal utility on the second apple. 8, yeah, right, 8, right? And then, because you take the difference at each step. And here it looks like it's going to be 7, right, I think. And here it's 6 and 5 and 4 and 3. You get these numbers right here. 10, so we got 10, 9, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5. Here it is, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5. So, I mean, actually it's more realistic. It's a more realistic problem, as much as we can make this problem really realistic, is for me to give you total utilities and for you to start there and you derive marginal utilities from total utilities. Obviously, you're going to have to do that on the exam. I don't know if you've looked through the problems and so forth, but there's a number of problems, I know there's some repetition in there, but where you have to kind of determine marginal utilities from total utilities and vice versa in a chart. Okay. So at any rate, you find these, you divide by the price, okay? So this right here, these 2 columns right here is what you're going to look at to determine how you're going to spend down your $14 for the week. All right. Okay, so again, this is review. I just want to do this. I want to take this a little, as I say, stroll down memory lane, because I know you got this on the test. I want you guys to do well. So if you're a little rusty. So what you're going to peel off those, you got $14 for the week you're paid. So you're going to peel off dollars. What are you going to buy first? Are you going to buy an apple, or are you going to buy an orange? What do you think, class? Which delivers the most bang per buck? These are apples over here, okay, and these are oranges. So you have to compare these two numbers, right? So you're going to buy an orange first, okay? And the price of an orange, and I remember we tweaked this, but let's just mark that out. It's $2. They tell you the price of an orange is $2, price of an apple is $1. Okay, so you're going to spend the first $2 on an orange. So you're going to buy that one there, okay? And there's the marginal utility per price. So we buy one orange, okay? And then you just go, you go from there. So you add $14. You're going to subtract $2 for an orange, okay? That leaves you with $12. Now what are you going to buy? Well, now you compare this marginal utility to price to this one. And you're kind of indifferent here, okay? So you're going to buy an orange, and you're also going to buy an apple. You got plenty of money to do that. So I'm going to subtract $2 for another orange, okay? And I'm going to subtract $1 for another apple. So I'm going to spend $3 there buying one of each, and that leaves me with $9 left to spend, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so now I have bought two oranges. It doesn't matter which of these, maybe this one and this one. So I've bought one apple and two oranges, and I've spent $5. Now what am I going to buy next? Apple or an orange? Well, get more bang per buck here with the orange again. So I'm going to buy this orange, okay, and so forth. So that's how we did this. So I'll buy an orange, going to cost me $2. Leaves me with $7, okay? So you just kind of do this little number here, and then when you've done this one here, and then now you can either buy the second apple or the fourth orange. You're kind of indifferent between those two because they both deliver the same bang per buck. All right? So you'll buy an apple and you'll buy an orange. That takes $3 away from this. You'll buy another orange for $2, another apple for $1, and okay. I think you see where we're going. Then you count up the apples and oranges. I don't think I need to carry that further. Okay? But at each step, you're trying to, you look at these two expressions here, marginal utility of apples over the price of apples, and the marginal utility of oranges, I'll just say B, over the price of oranges. And you're looking at this thing, okay? And you're trying to equilibrate this. Now, so how are we trying to make this equal? Because that's ultimately where you're driving things. You'll see that these numbers, first off, there's some patterns in this table we're working through. Builds off, first off, diminishing marginal utility. See, these numbers always decrease in this column. That's a real world thing. That second pancake's not as good as the first one, okay? Keep using that. So these numbers always decrease, which forces these numbers to decrease because marginal utility per price is going to move in the same direction as marginal utility. Okay, so these numbers are decreasing. Now notice as you work down this and the way we're doing it, you're always getting the last number in each column closer and closer together. So you're moving toward this equation here, okay? If I had an equal here, you're moving toward that constantly. Now, until you're there, you may have something like this or the other way. So I want us to focus on this just a second. If you have an imbalance in the bang per buck, man, this ought to help you answer the question I'm about to ask, but marginal utility to price, suppose the last dollar you spent, every week you spend up your income, okay? And so the last dollar you spent last week resulted in this. And you say, you know what? I bet I could reallocate my spending, buy more of one thing, which would cost me to buy less of another on my fixed income, in a way that I derive more satisfaction from my paycheck. In other words, how would you reallocate your spending between A and B so that you experience more total utility? More total utility. You're either going to buy more of A and less of B, or more of B and less of A. So what do you think there, class? If this is the situation on the last dollar you spend, then a rational consumer is going to what? Spend more on A or more on B? What do you think? Because if you spend more on one, you spend less on the other. Okay, now this is on the test too, okay? So to make sure you understand. If this is the situation, would you buy more B and less A, or more A and less B? Okay, more A, all right. That makes sense? Okay, that's a possibility, I guess. I'll just put a question mark there. More A and less B. So let's put a question mark there, okay? Let's check that out a second. All right, here's where I want you to think as an economist. We know we need to drive this up. That needs to go up. This needs to go down. All right, the only way this can go up, because marginal utility diminishes, right? Remember, diminishing marginal utility. That's the theory behind these numbers going down. The second pancake is not as good as the first. The third is not as good as the second, which is not as good as the first. So to drive this up, to make that last apple deliver more satisfaction, would we consume more or less apples? Well, you consume less, okay? Less. So actually, and I appreciated the input on this, but you consume less A and more B. Okay? Let's think about that. If you consume less A because of diminishing marginal utility, when you consume less A, you drive up the utility associated with the last unit of A you consumed. You don't have any effect on price, okay? Apples and oranges, you're a consumer, okay? But you consume less A, and that'll drive up the marginal utility of the last unit of A consumed. Consume more B, and you'll drive down the marginal utility of B consumed, the last unit. Okay? So if you want that last orange to not really be worth much to you, not deliver much satisfaction, then buy a bunch of oranges. You'll get tired of them, right? That last one will make you sick. Okay? So this is what you want to do. Make sure you understand that, okay? This is, and that ultimately, if you continue to do that, that will establish this equilibrium. Okay? This is what you're always shooting for. And this is belaboring this, but this is a central concept in consumer behavior, which is what we're talking about in Chapter 7. Consumer behavior. You have a principle similar to this in production theory as well. We talk about marginal product per price you get to charge and so forth, but that's for another day. But as consumers, you always want to equate these two. Now, there's other questions we could talk about. You know, if you came back to this situation here, I just want to mention this, and you had this situation, and maybe you didn't have any effect over the consumption bundle, but you could somehow haggle for prices. Okay, one of these prices you're going to want to drive down before the other one. Okay, in other words, there might be a situation where you change the value of the denominators instead of the numerators to establish this relationship. But at any rate, for most of our problems here in this chapter, we're talking about how many units of each that the rational consumer would consume. That is, rational consumer behavior would dictate that you consume more of the unit that you want to drive down its marginal utility. So you consume more of B, and you consume less of the unit you want to drive down the marginal utility of its last unit. I hope that makes sense, okay? Lots of questions on that, okay? Because it's a central concept. So I think that's worth us doing. You know, actually this is the explanation behind the diamond water paradox and so forth. So spend some time on that too, if you would. Okay, so that's a central concept, maybe the most important concept. I'm sure it's the most important, but maybe it's almost like the only real concept in Chapter 7. In Chapter 9, we're talking about cost of production. Should be able to distinguish between explicit cost and implicit cost, and then calculate both accounting profit and normal profit. So look at the example they do here in your text, okay? But we had this graphic here we've spent some time on to say that economic profit's always smaller than accounting profit. So if this is anything at all, that's a good thing. It means you have some accounting profit. So at any rate, be sure and spend some time on that concept. We got into, okay, we're into production theory here. So, okay, all right, remember our conversation here. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the short run total product curve. We're in the short run here, okay, because there's a fixed input. Maybe it's floor space in your factory or what have you. A fixed input, which means, remember I drew the little picture of the baseball bat factory, had 4 workstations, and it's humming along as you build up your labor to 4 workers. You're producing output, increasing output at an increasing rate. So 2 workers obviously can produce more than 1, all right? Now, 2 million workers won't produce more than 1 million because you can only pack so many workers in your plant. But I'm talking about in the initial stages, you can take advantage of specialization. So when you add that second worker, they increase your marginal product. So you have increasing marginal product. See that here? And we measured that by, let me get my, I'll use my faculty card here. Turn it here. All right. But notice your tangent lines rotate this way initially. As you expand the quantity of labor to expand output, then you're increasing your product at an increasing rate. And that's purely because of specialization. But at some point, overcrowding begins to set in which case maybe 4 workers will produce more than 3, and 5 workers will produce more than 4. You're increasing output at a decreasing rate. So you're still going up, but at a decreasing rate. So that's what the marginal product is telling you here. So you're always producing more output with more labor until you get up to 6.5 workers. Whoops, I'm sorry. Till you get up to 6.5 workers. So the marginal product looks like this. Average product is where we were looking at the average units of output per worker. So remember I'm going to go ahead and draw on this, but say for 2 workers, we connected these 2 points here and drew this secant line. Remember that? The slope of the secant is the average, and it continues to increase too until you get up to about here. Right there. Okay, see how this is rotating this way? That's why the average is increasing as well until you get to right about here. Now look at what's happening there. The average is a maximum. The secant line achieves its steepest slope at 3.5 workers. Average output per worker is increasing. All along the way, the tangent line is pulling the secant in its direction, and that's the marginal product. The tangent line has a slope equal to the marginal product, or maybe I should have said the reverse of that. The marginal product is equal to the slope of the tangent. So at any rate, it's always pulling the average in its direction. So when the marginal is above the average, it pulls the average up. When the marginal is below the average, it pulls it down. So it goes to the extreme, in this case, the maximum of the average product. Hopefully this makes sense. It's ringing a bell here. We took this total product curve here and we basically turned it this way so that you would have product on the vertical axis and cost. I said that. So that you would have, here's product. So you have product on the horizontal axis and the cost of labor on the vertical axis, okay? Remember we did a little scaling there, $100 a worker or what have you. So but at any rate, if you take the curve, you get a total cost curve. If you take the total product curve and turn it and exchange the X and Y axis. You also get an S-shaped curve, except it looks this way, okay? And that's what this is. This total variable cost curve, and you shift it up by the amount of the fixed cost. All right, and so we go through the same discussion here to get these average cost curves, you know, where you're looking at secant lines and tangent lines. Okay, so we went through that. And these are two very important curves. They're U-shaped, average total cost and average variable cost curve. They're U-shaped because of the law of diminishing ultimately marginal returns to labor or increasing marginal cost. Those are equivalent expressions, equivalent theories, if you will. So you have increasing marginal cost. That is to say there's a marginal cost curve that intersects these two curves. Here it is. And whenever the marginal is above the average, it pulls the average up. Whenever the marginal is below the average, it pulls it down. So it goes through the minimum of each of these U-shaped curves. Okay. Hopefully that made sense then. Hopefully I'm just, reminding you of something that we've already talked about. And then we got into the long run, and we talked about economies of scale. First off, you have that up to this point here, economies of scale for the long run, average total cost curve. So if the plant can change its size, you're in the long run. So you expand the floor space. You might be able to drive down this average total. These are short run average total cost curves, SRATC. So you might be able to bring it down for a larger plant size, up to a point. That's called the minimum efficient scale. The size plant that minimizes average total cost, called the minimum efficient scale. So you have economies of scale, constant return scale, diseconomies of scale. If this is downward sloping for a long run, for a long range of plant sizes, the minimum efficient scale would be over here, and maybe no plant has achieved that size yet. So there you're going to have a natural monopoly. Things are going to gravitate toward a natural monopoly. So those are the concepts in Chapter 9. Hope that makes sense. I hope you read about the Weber metal stamping machine. That's really a fascinating discussion there about that particular machine in Southern California. It's a 140-foot tall metal stamping machine. That's kind of neat. Not just anyone can have one of those. The point is about economies of scale, okay? You have economies of scale when you have to make a big upfront fixed investment in a Weber stamping machine. 140-foot tall thing, going to cost a few $1 million probably. So when you have these huge fixed costs, expect there to be significant economies of scale. Chapter 10, okay, we're getting into perfect competition or pure competition. So, you should recognize these characteristics of pure competition. And then we go in the next chapter to monopoly. So the main thing, the main thing, I was going to say most important thing or main thing, I came out with main thing. The main thing here, okay, is that you're a price taker, okay? A firm in perfect competition has no control over price. See that? There we go. They're a price taker, which is to say that the firm in perfect competition is a price taker, faces a horizontal individual demand curve. They charge the same price for however many bushels of wheat they bring to market, okay, or whatever it is. Notice the price, it's just horizontal there. This is the picture. You still got the same cost curves, a U-shaped ATC and AVC curve. But the individual demand curve is horizontal for firm in perfect competition. That is to say, price and marginal revenue are the same. And we did that in class, like what's the marginal revenue of the fifth unit? It's the change in total revenue. And so you would look at the total revenue of 5 units and subtract total unit from 4. And that gives you this rectangle here, if you will, which always equals the price. Okay, so some things that are evident here. Price equals marginal revenue in perfect competition. Is that true in monopoly? Nope. Price is greater than marginal revenue in monopoly. Okay? But you're a price taker here. The cost curves are the same as before. Always equate marginal revenue and marginal cost in every market structure. So this is where you're going to be. If you're a rational supplier, you're going to charge this price here. It's dictated by the market. Remember, we have the market supply and demand curve that intersect at a price of $131. And this is what you'll bring to market. So we spent some time on that. You may have a loss. Okay. All right, may have a loss. Okay, and so we talked about the shutdown condition. If the price in the marketplace falls below minimum average variable cost, then the supply curve makes this jump. Above that, the supply and marginal cost curve are the same. This is what you'll supply as a supplier in perfect competition. But it'll jump over here. You won't supply any if the market price is less than minimum average variable cost. That is to say, the price you get to charge for each bushel of wheat does not cover your labor or whatever your variable costs are. You see, you got to experience a price that covers the variable cost, and it helps you pay down some of your fixed cost. All right? And then we went to the long run, profit maximization in the long run. We had this discussion here about increasing cost, decreasing cost, and constant cost industries, where you trace out this long run supply curve. Okay? So this is a constant cost. This is an increasing cost industry. I'm sorry. Here's an increasing cost industry, and here's a constant cost industry. And there's a little two-step they take you through to show you how you move. You know, if there's an increase in demand with no barriers to entry, there'll be suppliers move in. Okay? Do you wind up where you began at the same level? If you do, you have a constant cost industry. It all has to do with how the resource market is responding to changes in the product market. So the resources that are used in producing the product, are they becoming more expensive or not? So I think we use lithium, price of lithium. You drive that up significantly as you produce more cars that use lithium batteries, and you're looking, you know, at the market for electric cars. That could be an increasing cost industry if that's the case. All right. Boy, lithium's getting hard to find. Got to have that to make a Tesla. Okay. Then you would have an increasing cost. The market for Teslas would be an increasing cost industry, because the more of these we supply, we're driving up production cost. Okay? All right, so that's the theory in Chapter 11. I want you to be aware of that. And then, I'm sorry, Chapter 10. Chapter 11, pure monopoly. Okay? And since this is the most recent topic, I don't think I need to say much on this. But marginal revenue is less than price here. This is picture we looked at a while ago is so important. This one here, so important. Okay, so you got the same U-shape marginal ATC and marginal cost curve. And remember how the three-step process in the next page here, it tells you how to find where the monopolist is going to be. So study that. Look at the problems I gave you last time about finding equilibrium for a monopolist. And then study this too, regulating utilities. Okay, natural monopolies. Any questions in 10 seconds? Well, I'll put the test up tomorrow morning, Friday morning, and I'll leave it up through midnight Sunday night. Okay? All right.